Welcome to the part 2 of the scariest real stories and mysteries. It doesn't matter what from the real horror story takes, from ghost stories to UFOs and scariest monsters. Ultimately, these stories evoke fear, the most hidden instinct of us humans. Of course, horror movies can terrify any viewer, but these are real stories from the heart of the story that have pretended deeply into our minds and even scared us with their disturbing presence for a long time. All this is due to the fact that the horror stories are real. Warning, this video contains sometimes heartbreaking and disturbing issues that are not recommended for all people to watch. Stay with us. Hello guys, welcome to the new video on the Black Ocean. Today we are going to talk about the scariest real stories and mysteries part 2. Operation Wandering Spirits. If you're going to look for a more effective way to defeat enemy soldiers in more than lethal weapons, it's undoubtedly psychological terror. This is exactly the same method used by US forces during the Vietnam War. In the culture of the Vietnamese people, a proper burial of the decayed in his town allows his souls to go to destination in the afterlife with satisfaction. But if this is not the case, according to the Vietnamese, individual soul will try to find its birthplace, and thus it will not take long to become a wandering soul. The American forces in the Vietnam War knew about this belief of people and used it as a tactic to create terror among the enemy soldiers. Knowing that many Vietnamese people were worried about soldiers dying far from their homes, American forces used a psychological tactic called Operation Wandering Ghost. The US Army's 16th Psychic Operation Battalion recorded the terrifying tapes, which they broadcast over a huge loudspeaker over the jungles of Vietnam. For many Vietnamese soldiers, there was nothing more terrifying than hearing the gut-wrenching screams of ghosts wandering in the darkness far from their homeland. The dreaded tactic was inspired by the Ghost Army tactic during World War II, a unit of mock tanks and personnel carriers that staged a show to fool German intelligence into showing that the Allies had superior forces. Many Vietnamese soldiers truly believed that the terrifying message broadcast on the battlefield, imagining that their fallen comrades now roamed among them in awe of the lost spirits. Many of the ghost tapes were produced by South Vietnamese forces, allies of the Americans. In these tapes, soldiers were asked to stop fighting. One of these messages read, "My friends, I'm back to inform you that I'm dead. Yes, I'm dead. Be careful not to harm me, comrades. Go home before it's too late." These tapes were so well produced and convincing that hundreds of people filled the battlefields and took refuges in the mountains. Of course, not all Vietnamese soldiers were deceived by the Americans, but in both cases, the psychological operation was effective because the remaining soldiers were also furiously shooting towards these eerie sounds, only to targeted by the enemy's bullets in a fraction of a second. A torture device called Phone. Of all the true horror stories that come out of Americans' prisons, perhaps none of is infamous as the phone Tucker incident. For inmates incarcerated at Tucker State Penitentiary in Arkansas in the early 1960s, nothing in life was more terrifying than the Tucker telephone. The Tucker phone was a sadistic method of punishing inmates at the state prison now known as the Tucker Unit of the Arkansas Department of Correction. This torture device is the result of the morbid thoughts of Dr. E.Y.A. Rollins was the prison doctor and Jim Brockton was the prison warden. Tucker's phone looked like the old magnet phones, but with the addition of an electric generator and two dry cell batteries, it had become the most feared torture device in the history of American prison. Tucker phone, which was connected to a very strong electrical sources, was the device that was attached to victims provided parts of gave the electronic shock. The prisoners who were sent to this hospital room were laid on a table and wires were placed on their skin. The ground wire was wrapped around the prison's beak too, and the hot wire connected to the power source was tied to genitals of the prisoners. As the prison medics began to turn on Tucker's phone, the victim was subjected to a terrifying deluge of electric shock. Sometimes these torture sessions were so long that they were known as long-distance calls. The brutality of prison guards to use this terrifying torture decided has been described in detail by Tom Morton in the book Accomplices in Crime, the Arkansas Prison Scandal, published in 1970. Morton writes somewhere in long-distance calls, the prisoners was shocked several times, and only when the prisoner lost consciousness was the electric key cut off. But sometimes the skill of the telephone operator was not enough, and this caused the continuous grins not only to make this prisoner unconscious, but also to cause irreparable damage to the testicles of the prison. Unfortunately, not only did many prisoners suffer permanent physical injuries from these inhuman tortures, but they also suffered from numerous psychological problems. But Tucker's phone was not an accident. Instead, as a 1967 Newsweek report showed, prisoners were routinely beaten with 1.5-meter paddles, had needles stuck under their fingernails, tortured with lead, punished with the electric chair. Tucker's state prison atrocities became so famous that Tucker's phone later found its way to silver screen in the movie Rebecca 1980. Unfortunately, even after it was reported that the Tucker's phone would no longer be used against prisoners, two torture devices found new uses. This time, Tucker's phone found its way into the Chicago Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit, and during the 1980s, under the supervision of L.T. John Beck, it became a tool for torturing suspects. Many reports also indicate that Americans interrogators abroad have also used this device to torture prisoners of war. Here you are with the question, which one of these happening do you think is worse than the other? And I think, in my opinion, the Tucker phone is more worse than the other. But what do you think about them? Write to comment. Thank you for your watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video with your friends, share the channel with your friend. Also activate the bell for notice when we upload a new video. Here you are with the recommended movie and book for today. Till the next video, goodbye.